Good afternoon from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's 1:28 p.m. on Monday, the 23rd of February 2026, and it's currently 29 degrees, so it's rather hot. I've just finished cleaning the Birdie Boys cages. The little bows sitting, because I put them in I put them both in Kermie's cage while I clean Bo's cage. So little Bo's sitting there looking a bit confused actually. I've opened the cage door so he can retreat back to his own cage like Kermie has done, because Kermie prefers Bo's cage. Where is he? Oh, he's over here. And little Bo's just sitting there looking a bit sort of nonplussed, and the lorikeets are here twittering away, which is what Kermie's responding to. So yes, anyway, I'm hot and bothered, but I've cleaned the wild bird bath for them to swim and drink, and I've cleaned both bird cages, and now I'm hot and bothered, a bit knackered now, quite frankly. But well, the knacker yard has not got me yet. I've managed to avoid the knackery. Not that I have bollocks to knacker off anyway, but you know what I mean. I have survived against all odds. I will survive. Well, it would be nice if I could bloody well thrive, wouldn't it? But I guess having the energy and the motivation to clean both cages and the little wild bird bath is thriving. It's doing remarkably well. So I thought we would continue with chapter 2 of The Garden of the Gods by Gerald Durrell. This is the last of the Corfu trilogy. And then what shall I read you when this is completed, people of Earth? Still got all those love poems and letters to read, but I don't know. They were okay, weren't they? I guess we could persevere with that book, or I could pick up on one of the other lovely books I purchased that ghastly day on the 14th of December when there was not only the Bondi shooting, unbeknownst to Jared and I, because we were here in Brisbane in the Lifeline Book Fest, but it was also the last time I had seen or had contact with Jared. Really was a fucking dark day in hell, just saying. But anyway, he'd been drifting on and off for really the last 4 years, so we'll leave him drift. He's got his own path and I have my own path, and he is greatly missed. A few days ago on the 20th would have marked the 34th year of our friendship, but there's no point marking it since he's no longer present in my life, and I just have to accept it. I lost 2 core family, close friends that were like family to me on the 31st of October and again on the 14th of December, so it was a rough couple of months really. But I have one person that's solid in my life who's a wonderful human being, and that is my doctor, and if God forbid he left my energy for whatever reason, I'd be utterly distraught, because I have really very few friends. I mean, I still have contact with some of my Facebook friends and still have a bit of occasional contact with my childhood friend Margaret. So not everyone's completely gone, but it just feels very, to lose my core close friends feels very kind of bereft. But the world's not how it used to be, and never will be again. And I will have to adjust and adapt and move forward and find people to, resonate with me, I guess. I mean, there's my friends Belinda and Bill, but I haven't seen them since before Christmas either. And Robin and Peter. Well, Robin and Peter, I think, were displeased that they wanted to set me up with a man they seemed to really like, and when I didn't partake of that carrot in front of a rabbit. And anyway, he really was obtuse. I think they're annoyed with me. I don't even know, because again, there's been no contact. But that is what it is, people of Earth. I'm not a prize heifer to be held at every piece of fucking gristle coming along thinking they're gonna treat me shabbily. I wouldn't even throw myself at a man who treated me decently. It's like, have a bit of fucking dignity and couth and decorum. Just saying. So, and I'm okay on my own. I've got my garden, which is like a resort that I co-created with the gods. And I've got my little birdie chums, and I've got my wonderful YouTube audience who come along and see what the Tanya's up to next. I made a beautiful cheesecake, and kind of a weird news came over me out of the blue. I've been wanting to make that cheesecake for a couple of weeks. I had the ingredients in the fridge. For some reason, I just didn't do it and procrastinated. And then all of a sudden yesterday, it just came over like a wave, almost like, to be fair, almost like a trance-like news-like state. And I said to myself, I'm going to make that cheesecake. I'm going to make it right now. And I did. I went into the kitchen and I put the biscuits into the plastic bag and I smashed it up with the rolling pin, which is the easiest way to crush biscuits. Last time I tried to crush them with my bar mix and it was ridiculous and didn't work, so I thought I'll revert to the method that I know works best. Anyway, and then I set about making the cheesecake, and then while I was making the cheesecake, I was watching Rose Bar podcast with her son. You know, she reminds me of myself. Not that I'm a famous comedian like her, or actor like her, but she even begins her podcast thanking all sentient beings and, you know, all humans and all animals. And I thought, that's so similar to me. Because sometimes I start my, YouTube videos off that way too. Well, it's a very Jewish thing to be in touch with the multiverses, people of Earth. It's a very, very Jewish thing, because we know that everything is connected in unity and cosmic consciousness in the Ein Sof, or the source field, not just the field, but the source. We all contain a tiny, tiny, tiny little spark of the divine, according to Kabbalah, that is. And it's nice to keep that little spark alive inside our body, mind and spirits, and maintain that level of neshama, soul. Right. Let me just check on my birdie boy. Kermie, you've got a clean cage. And Bo's got a clean cage. And you're on Bo's clean cage. And Bo is nibbling the swing that they've been avoiding for the last week. Oh yes. Now that Kermie sees Bo playing with his swing, he's going to get jealous and probably beat him up. Boys. What you doing, Kermie? Is little boy chewing your swing? Little boy, you happy bird? Yellow bird, fly high up banana tree. Oh, Kenny's got crazy eyes, but agitated. Alright, well, you both got clean cages, so you can't complain. Just got a bit of a bellyache because I had 2 pieces of cheesecake today and it's diabolical, but anyway, it's very nice. We'll see how we go. Chapter 2, Ghosts and Spiders. Take heed of the foul fiend. Shakespeare, King Lear. Throughout the year, Thursday was, as far as I was concerned, the most important day of the week, for that was the day that Theodore visited us. Sometimes it would be a long family day, a drive down south and a picnic on a remote beach, or something similar. But normally, Theo and I would set off alone on one of our excursions, as Theodore insisted on calling them. Bedecked with our collecting equipment and bags, nets, bottles and test tubes, and accompanied by the dogs, we would set out to explore the island in much the same spirit of adventure as filled the bosoms of Victorian explorers who ventured into darkest Africa. But not many of the Victorian explorers had the benefit of Theodore as a companion. As a handy encyclopedia to take along on a trip, he could not be bettered. To me, he was omniscient as a god, but much nicer since he was tangible. Cute. It was not only his incredible erudition that astonished everyone who met him, but his modesty. I remember how he would sit on the veranda, surrounded by the remnants of one of Mother's sumptuous teas, listening to the tired cicadas singing the evening in, plying Theodore with questions. Meticulously dressed in his tweed suit, his blonde hair and beard immaculate, his eyes would sparkle with interest as each new subject was introduced. I try not to come too close to the camera because my face is a mess. Terrible sores from my CPAP mask. Oh, poor Mama too. Anyway, I could hide up with makeup, but why hide? Wounded soldiers must carry on, people of Earth. Right. Theodore, Larry would ask, there's a painting up in the monastery at Paleo Kastritsa. Sounds like paleo castrating. I'm sure that's not what it means in Greek though. I might be closer than I'd like to admit though. You never know. Anyway, where were we? The monastery at Paleo Kastritsa that the monks say was done by Panayotis Doxeras. Do you think it is? Well, Theodore would say cautiously. Oh, I've just got a nerve pinched in my eyeball by beside my eye. I'm in the wars, people of Earth. In the wars. Well, Theodore would say cautiously, I'm afraid it's a subject about which I know very little, but I believe I'm right in saying that it's more likely to be the work of Sadzanis. He did that most interesting little picture in the Patera monastery, you know, the one on the upper road leading north of Corfu. And now he is, of course. During the next half hour he would give an all-embracing and succinct lecture on the history of painting in the Ionian Islands since about 1242, and then end by saying, if you want an expert opinion, there's Dr. Paramithiotis, who'd given you much more information than I can. It was small wonder that we treated him like an oracle. The phrase, Theo says, set the seal of authenticity on whatever item of information the person was going to vouchsafe. It was the touchstone for getting Mother's agreement to anything from the advisability of living entirely on fruit to the innocuousness of keeping scorpions in one's bedroom. Theodore was everything to everyone. With Mother, he could discuss plants, particularly herbs and recipes, while keeping her supplied with reading matter from his capacious library of detective novels. With Margot, he could talk of diets, exercises, and the various unguents supposed to have a miraculous effect on spots, pimples, and acne. He could keep pace effortlessly with any idea that entered the mercurial mind of my brother Larry, from Freud to peasant belief in vampires. While Leslie, he could entertain on the history of firearms in Greece or the winter habits of the hare. As far as I was concerned, with a hungry, questing and ignorant mind, Theodore represented a fountain of knowledge on every subject, from which I drank greedily. On Thursday, Theodore would generally arrive at about 10, sitting sedately in the back of the horse-drawn cab, silver Homburg on his head, his collecting box on his knees, his walking stick with its little gauze net on the end by his side. I, who had been up since 6 and peering down through the olive groves to see if he were coming, would by now have decided in despair that he had forgotten what day it was, or that he had fallen down and broken his leg, or that some other catastrophe had overtaken him. What's going on, little Kermie? You're a bit agitated. Is that because little Bo's still sitting in your cage? Well, it was only temporary while I cleaned Bo's cage. Calm down. We'll go back when he's ready. I'll see Boots. You're acting how you acted when we were about to have that little earth tremor last year. When was that? July or August last year? That was freaky shit, by the gods. Anyway, where were we? Distracted by all the mischief from Kermie pacing up and down. Look at him. Up and down, like a bloody sergeant major. What's the matter, Kermie? What's wrong? Are you annoyed that Bo didn't come back into his cage with you? All right, back you go. Back in Bo's cage. Bo's quite happy sitting there. What you doing, Bo? Are you a happy boy? Yes. That's the mama too. I'm very happy. Alright, handsome boys. Should be bloody happy. They get so well looked after. Spoilt lavishly. Who looks after the mama? Doesn't matter. Mama looks after mama. Right, here we go. My relief at seeing him, grave, sedate and intact, in the back of the cab would be considerable. The sun, up until then suffering from an eclipse, would start to shine again, having shaken me by the hand courteously. I'm watching you, Kermie, bullying the little one. I'm watching you. Theodore would pay the cabman and remind him to return at the appropriate hour in the evening. Just want to see what he does. They're fine. I think they're fine. Right. And remind him to return at the appropriate hour in the evening. Then, hoisting his collecting bag onto his shoulders, he would contemplate the ground, arising and falling on his well-polished boots. I think, you know, he would say, we might investigate those little ponds near Kontakali. That is to say, unless there is somewhere else, you know, that you would prefer to go. I would say happily that the little ponds near Kontakali would suit me fine. Good, Theodore would say. One of the reasons I particularly want to go that way is because the path takes us past a very good ditch. You know, that is to say, a ditch in which I have found a number of rewarding specimens. What's going on there? What is that? I could have sworn I saw like a piece of string or a thread he was trapped in, but it must have been a trick of the light. Yes, little Bo. Look at my little boys, my sweet little babies, my darlings, my angels, my sweethearts, my baby faces, my angel faces, my snookies. Right. I would say happily that the little ponds near Kontakali would suit me fine. I know I've read that. We found a number of rewarding specimens in the ditch. Right, here we go. Back in the room, people are there. Talking cheerfully, we would set out, and the dogs, tongues lolling, tails wagging, would leave the shade of the tangerine trees and follow us. Presently, a panting Lugaritzia would catch up with us, carrying the bag containing our lunch, which we had both forgotten. They're like two little absent-minded professors, aren't they? They're very sweet, the two of them. Oh, look at you, Kermie. Oh, look at you, being a handsome boy. We would make our way through the olive groves, chattering together, stopping periodically to examine a flower or a tree, bird or caterpillar. Everything was grist to our mill, and Theodore knew something about everything. Pretty boy. No, I don't know of any way you could preserve mushrooms for your collection. Whatever you use, they would, shrivel up. The best way would be to draw or paint them, or perhaps, photograph them. You could collect the spore patterns though, and they are remarkably pretty. What? Well, you remove the cup of the mushroom or toadstool and place it on a white card. The fungus must be ripe, of course, or it won't drop its spores. After a time, you remove the cap carefully from the card. Oh, there it is. That is to say, you take care not to smudge the spores, and you will find an attractive sort of pattern is left. The dogs would fan out ahead of us, cocking their legs, snuffling in the dark holes that honeycombed the great ancient olive trees, and dashing off in noisy and futile pursuit of the swallows that skimmed millimetres high over the ground down the long meandering avenues of trees. Presently we would reach more open country where the olive groves would give way to small fields of fruit trees and maize or vineyards. Aha, Theodore would say, stopping by a weedy, water-filled ditch and peering into it, his eyes gleaming, his beard bristling with enthusiasm. Now here's something interesting. There, do you see? Just by the end of my stick. I would strain my eyes but see nothing. Theodore, attaching his net to the end of his walking stick, would make a neat dipping motion like a man taking a fly out of his soup, and would then haul in the net. There, you see? It's the egg sac of the Hydrophilus pisceus, that is to say, the great silver water beetle. It's the female, and as you know, that spins, makes the sac. It may have up to 50 eggs in it. The curious thing is, just a minute while I get my forceps. There, you see? Now this, you might say chimney, though perhaps mast would be better, is filled with air, so the whole thing is rather like a little boat which can't capsize. The air-filled mast prevents it. Yes, if you put it in the aquarium it should hatch out, although I must warn you that the larvae are very, very fierce and will probably eat your other specimens. Let's see if we can catch an adult. Patiently as any wading bird, Theodore would pace the edge of the ditch, dipping his net in at intervals and sweeping it to and fro. Aha! Success! He would exclaim at last, and carefully place a large black beetle, legs thrashing indignantly, into my eager hands. I would admire the strong, ribbed wing cases, the bristly legs, the whole body with a faint olive green sheen. It's a rather slow swimmer compared with the other, aquatic beetles, and it has a very curious method of swimming. Instead of using the legs together like any other aquatic species, it uses them alternately. It gives it a, very jerky appearance. The dogs on these occasions were somewhat of a mixed blessing, as sometimes they would distract us by rushing into a peasant's farmyard and attacking all his chickens, the ensuing altercation with the chicken owner wasting at least half an hour. At other times, they would be quite useful, surrounding a snake so that it could not escape, and barking prodigiously until we came to investigate. For me, at any rate, they were comforting to have around. Roger, like a stocky, unclipped black lamb, Whittle, elegant in his silky coat of fox red and black, and Puke, looking like a miniature liver and white spotted bull terrier. Occasionally they would get bored if we stopped for too long, but generally they lay patiently in the shade, pink tongues flicking, lolling, tails wagging amicably whenever they caught our eye. It was Roger that first introduced me to one of the most beautiful spiders in the world, with the elegant sounding name of Erisus niger. We had walked a considerable distance, and at noon, when the sun was at its hottest, decided to stop and eat our picnic in the shade. We sat down at the edge of an olive grove and started feasting on sandwiches and ginger beer. I love ginger beer. I must go and buy some ginger beer cordial and some peach iced tea cordial, and I must get my SodaStream canisters swapped over for fully gassed ones. Make my own ginger beer and peach iced tea, people of Earth. When is payday? Fucking week and 8 days away. Fuck! Anyway, c'est la vie, babies. Bills have to be prioritised first. I really should sell that car. I hardly ever bloody use it. It costs me more in rego than in petrol, just sitting there like a garden ornament. It's ridiculous. Normally when Theodore and I had our meal, the dogs would sit around, panting and gazing at us imploringly, since we were always of the opinion that our food was in some way superior to theirs. They were always of the opinion, rather. and so having finished their rations would try to obtain largesse from us, using all the wiles of an Asiatic beggar. On this particular occasion, it's meant as metaphor, people are there. I'm not a racist, and I'm quite certain he wasn't either. It's just poetic license, you understand. On this particular occasion, Whittle and Puke rolled their eyes, panted and gasped, and tried by every means possible to show us that they were at death's door from starvation. Unusually, Roger did not join in. Instead, he was sitting out in the sunshine in front of a patch of brambles, watching something with great intentness. I went over to see what was intriguing him to such an extent that he was ignoring my sandwich crusts. At first I could not see what it was. Then suddenly I saw something so startlingly beautiful that I could hardly believe my eyes. You singing, Kermie? Little Bo was starting to sing too. Gonna sing for your supper? My goodness. It was a tiny spider the size of a pea, and at first glance it looked like an animated ruby or a moving drop of blood. Uttering a whoop of joyous enthusiasm, I rushed to my collecting bag and got a glass-topped pillbox in which to catch this brilliant creature. He was not easily caught, however, for he could take prodigious jumps for his size, and I had to pursue him round and round the bramble bush for some time before I had him safely locked in my pillbox. We've got competition. Triumphantly, I carried this gorgeous spider over to Theodore. Aha, said Theodore, taking a swig of ginger beer before producing his magnifying glass, the better to examine my capture. Yes, an Eresus niger. Yes. This is, of course, the male. Such a pretty creature. The female is, all black, but the male is very brightly coloured. On close examination through a magnifying glass, the spider turned out to be even more beautiful than I had thought. Its forequarters, or cephalothorax, were velvety black with little specks of scarlet at the edges. What are you doing, crazy birds? Its rather stocky legs were ringed with white bands, so that it looked ridiculously as though it were wearing striped pants. But it was its abdomen that was really eye-catching. This was vivid huntsman's red, marked with 3 round black spots rimmed with white hairs. It was the most spectacular spider that I had ever seen. Sounds almost as pretty as the Australian redback spider with its stripe of red down its shiny black body. Very pretty spiders indeed. Almost triangular shaped, the way they hold their legs and adjacent to their little bodies. Deadly poisonous if you get stung with them, but very pretty spiders indeed. Handsome boy. There's a little one there. What's Bo doing? Bo! You enjoying being in Kermie's cage for a change? Something different, I suppose. Change is as good as a holiday, isn't it, little Bo? It was the most spectacular spider that I had ever seen, and I was determined to try to get it a mate and see if I could breed them. I subjected the bramble bush and the terrain around it to a minute scrutiny, but with no success. Theodore explained to me that the female spider digs a burrow about 3 inches long, lined with tough silk. You can distinguish it from other spiders' burrows, he said, because the silk at one point is protruded like an apron, and this forms a sort of roof over the mouth of the tunnel. Moreover, the outside is covered with bits and pieces of the female spider's past meals, in the shape of grasshopper legs and wing cases, and the remains of beetles. Armed with this knowledge, I went the following day and combed the entire area around the bramble bush once again. After spending the whole afternoon on it, I still did not meet with success. Irritably, I started on my way home to tea. I took a shortcut that led me over some small hills covered with the giant Mediterranean heath, which seemed particularly to flourish in the sandy and rather desiccated terrain. It was the sort of wild, dry country favoured by antlions, fritillaries and other sun-loving butterflies, lizards and snakes. As I walked along, I suddenly came upon the ancient skull of a sheep. In one of its empty eye sockets, a praying mantis had laid its curious egg cases, which to me always looked like an oval pudding of some sort, made out of ribbed sponge cake. I was squatting down, examining this and wondering whether to take it to the villa to add to my collection, when I suddenly saw a burrow of a female spider, just as Theodore had described it. What's going on, Kenny boy? I'm so happy your beautiful tail feathers are back. You looked really stumpy and weird without them, didn't you? It wasn't a good look for a few months there. But now you're beautiful Indian ringneck with all your feathers. Happy boy. Happy boy. Happy boy. Right. I pulled out my knife and with great care excavated a large wedge of soil which, when levered out, contained not only the spider, but her burrow as well. Delighted with my success, I placed it carefully in my collecting bag and hurried back to the villa. I had already got I had already got the male installed in a small aquarium, but I felt the female was worthy of better things. I unceremoniously evicted 2 frogs and a baby tortoise from my largest aquarium and made it ready for her. When it was finished, decorated with bits of heather and interesting branches of moss, I carefully placed the wedge of earth containing her and her nest on the bottom and left her to recover from this sudden and unexpected house move. 3 days later, I introduced the male. At first it was very dull because he did nothing more romantic than rush about like some animated hot ember trying to catch the various insects I had put in the aquarium as provender. But then, early one morning when I went to look, I discovered he had found the lair of the female. He was walking to and fro around it in a curious, jerky fashion, his striped legs stiff, his body trembling with what one could only conclude was passion. Bit like Dave and his cousin Chris coming to see me at the casino, am I right? Twats. He strutted about in great excitement for a minute or so, then approached the burrow and disappeared under the roof. Oh, I still remember that. That was hilarious. Anyway, I don't know what came over them. It's really quite insane how they used to behave around me. Here, to my annoyance, I could no longer observe him, but I presumed that he must be mating with the female. He was in the burrow for about an hour, and then he emerged jauntily and continued his carefree pursuit of the bluebottles and grasshoppers that I had provided for him. By that he means bluebottle flies, not, the sea-going bluebottles. However, I removed him to another aquarium as a precautionary measure, since I knew that in some species the female had cannibalistic habits and was not averse to making a light snack of her husband. Now, the rest of the drama I could not witness in detail, but I saw bits of it. The female eventually laid a bunch of eggs which she carefully encapsulated in a web. This balloon of eggs she stored down her tunnel, but brought up each day to hang under the roof. Whether she did this so that the eggs could get more heat from the sun, or to allow them access to more fresh air, I was not certain. The egg case was disguised by having small morsels of beetle and grasshopper remains attached to the outside. As the days passed, she proceeded to add to the roof over the tunnel and finally constructed a silken roof above ground. I watched this architectural achievement for some considerable time, and then, as I could see nothing, I grew impatient. With the aid of a scalpel and a long darning needle, I carefully opened up the silken room. To my astonishment, I found that it was surrounded by cells in which all little munchkins, in which all the young spiders sat, while in the central hall lay the corpse of their mother. It was a macabre yet touching sight. The babies all sitting round the mortal remains of their mother in a sort of spider's wake. When the babies hatched, however, I was forced to let them all go. Providing food for some 80 minute spiders was a problem in catering which even I, enthusiastic though I was, could not solve. I wonder what tiny minute spiders even feed on. Maybe aphids? But aphids might even be bigger than them. Yes, that is a quandary. What would you do? What would you do, people of Earth? You gonna go back to your cage now, little boy? He's thinking about it. He's thinking about it. You gonna go in the swing? Bo, go in the swing. Swing time. Yeah, the swing. Yes, that's the one. No? Okay. Among the numerous friends that Larry saw fit to inflict us with was a strange pair of painters called Loomis Bean and Harry Bunny. Rather unfortunate surnames. Bunny and Bean, Bean and Bunny, Bill and Ben the Flower Pot Men, somewhat like that. They were both American and deeply devoted to each other, so much so that within 24 hours they were known privately to the family as Loomy Lover and Harry Honey. I wasn't far off assuming that they were a dynamic duo. They were young, very good looking, with the fluid, boneless grace of movement that you expect from coloured people but rarely get in Europeans. They wore perhaps a shade too many gold bangles and a soupçon too much scent and hair cream. But they were nice, and what was unusual in the painters who came to stay, hard-working. Like so many Americans, they were possessed of a charming naivete and earnestness, and these qualities, as far as Leslie was concerned at any rate, made them ideal subjects for practical jokes. I used to participate in these and then relate the results to Theodore, who used to get as much innocent pleasure as Leslie and I did out of the result. Every Thursday I had to report progress. Hello, birdie boys. And I sometimes got the feeling that Theodore looked forward to the jokes with more interest than he did the news of my menagerie. Leslie had a genius for practical jokes, and the childlike innocence of our two guests inspired him to new heights. It was shortly after their arrival that he got them to congratulate Spiro most prettily on his final success in taking out Turkish naturalization papers. Spiro, who, like most Greeks, considered the Turks to be slightly more malevolent than Satan himself, and who had spent several years fighting them, exploded like a volcano. Fortunately, Mother was near at hand and moved swiftly between the white-faced, protesting, bewildered Lumi and Harry, and Spiro's barrel-shaped, muscular bulk. She looked not unlike a diminutive Victorian missionary facing a charging rhino. "Gollies, Mrs. Durrells," Spiro roared, his gargoyle features purple with rage, his ham-like hands clenched. "Let's me pokes them one." Now, Spiro," said Mother, "I'm sure it's all a mistake. I'm sure there's an explanation." "They calls me a bastard Turks," roared Spiro. "I'm Greeks. I'm no bastard Turks." "Of course you're not," said Mother soothingly. "I'm sure it was just a mistake." "Mistakes?" bellowed Spiro, his plurals coming thick and fast with rage. "Mistakes? I'm not goings to be called a bastard's Turks by these bloody fairies, if you'll excuse my language, Mrs. Durrells." It was some considerable time before Mother could calm Spiro and get a coherent story out of the terrified Lumi lover and Harry honey. Honey lover, lover honey, kiss me, honey, honey, kiss me. Well, I won't have to worry about that since I'm a heterosexual, asexual celibate, but two gay men named Lover and Honey for nicknames is rather sweet. Rather sweet, actually. To you, my darlings. The episode gave her a severe headache. She was very cross with Leslie. Some time later, Mother had to move them out of the bedroom we had given them because it was going to be decorated. She put them temporarily into one of our large, gloomy attics. This gave Leslie the opportunity of telling them the story of the headless bell ringer of Kontokali, who died in the attic. He was the fiend who in 1604, or thereabouts, was official executioner and torturer to Corfu. First, he would torture his victims, and then he would ring his bell before they were finally beheaded. Getting slightly fed up with him, the villagers of Kontokali broke into the villa one night and beheaded him. Now, as a prelude to seeing his ghost, headless and with a gory stump, you would hear him frantically ringing his bell. Having convinced our earnest couple of the authenticity of this fable by getting it vouched for by Theodore, Leslie borrowed 52 alarm clocks from a friendly clockmaker in town, prized up 2 floorboards in the attic, and placed the clocks, all set to go off at 3 a.m, carefully between the joists. The effect of 52 alarm clocks all going off simultaneously was most gratifying. Not only did Lumi and Harry vacate the attic with all speed, uttering cries of terror, but in their haste they tripped each other up and, clasped in each other's arms, fell heavily down the attic stairs. The resulting turmoil woke the whole house, and it was some time before we could convince them that it was a joke and soothe them with brandy. Just going to check on my little snickies. Where is he? Can't see him. Oh, you're in the swing, little boy. He's chewing the swing rapaciously. It's funny how you can't see it from here. It's because Kermie's blocking the view. There he is. Chewing the swing. Right. This is progress. They have finally accepted the new swings arrangement. We'll see if they sleep in them tonight. They've been sulking for a week. Kermie's been sleeping with both feet strutted on the corners of his cage, adjacent on the edge of the cage like a drowning man. It's been quite odd. But I thought, well, you're going to sulk, you can sulk, I don't care, you'll get over yourself eventually. Everyone does, sooner or later, get over themselves. Even Indian ringneck protesting birds. Mother, together with our guests, once more had a severe headache next day and would hardly talk to Leslie at all. He really is making life difficult for everyone, isn't he? Like, I hate practical jokers. My ex-husband was one, and let me just say, he was nothing but a cuntish cunt. It was sadistic, it was nasty, and it contributed to the end of the marriage. All the vicious things that he thought were funny because he was a dull intellect, psychopath, knuckle-dragging Neanderthal. I had no choice but to extricate myself from that moron. Absolutely. Right, handsome boy. What are you doing now, Bo? She's not being a dull intellect Neanderthal moron, Mama too. No, even my birds are smarter than that creature. Phew. Using my own children in his last vicious practical joke is what finally destroyed his marriage for him. It took a lot, people of Earth. I was trying to hold my little family together, and then I thought, what the fuck for? It's just insane to stay with someone like that. Anyway, on we go and on we go. That was 31 years ago. Every now and then I just have these little flare-ups of memory when I get reminded by things that happen in stories, people of Earth. But yes, manipulating other people to cause emotional harm to someone, it's the lowest fucking act of debasement there is. Especially one's own very young children who've got no frickin' idea that they're being manipulated and used. Foul it was. Anyway, where were we? I'm so glad I'm free of that bastard and all the other bastards that were enablers and colluded with him and my mother and filthy stepfather. I'm glad I'm free of them all. I can sit in my lovely home, my lovely garden. When that fucking house is finished, there'll be no more crash bang booming for a while. I can have my resort back until Warren and Tash start demolishing and building on their land, but oh well, maybe there'll be a respite for about I don't know, they didn't say when they're going to do it. Hopefully there'll be a respite for a year or two before that starts up again. The affair of the invisible flamingos came about one day quite casually as we were sitting having tea on the veranda. Theodore had asked our pair of Americans how their work was progressing. "Oh, darling Theo," said Harry Honey, "we're getting on divinely, simply divinely. Aren't we, lover?" "We sure are," said Lumi Lover. "We sure are. The light here is fantastic, simply fantastic. It's as though the sun were closer to the earth somehow, you know." "It sure does seem that way," Harry Honey agreed. "It seems just like, as Lumi says, the sun is right down low, beaming straight at little old us. "I said that to you this morning, Harry Honey, didn't I?" said Lumi Lover. "You did, Lumi, you did. Right up there by that little barn. Do you remember? You said to me—" "Have another cup of tea," Mother interrupted, for she knew from experience that these post-mortems, to prove the togetherness of these two, would go on indefinitely. The conversation drifted on into the realms of art, and I scarcely listened until suddenly my attention was riveted by Lumi Lover saying, "Flamingos! Ooh, Harry Honey, flamingos! My favourite birds. Where, Les? Where?" "Oh, over there," said Leslie, giving a wave that embraced Corfu, Albania and the better half of Greece. "Great flocks of them." Theodore, I could see, was holding his breath, as was I, in case Mother, Margot or Larry would say anything to upset this outrageous lie. "Flamingos?" said Mother, interestedly. "I didn't know there were any flamingos here." "Yes," said Leslie solemnly. "Hundreds of them." "Did you know there were flamingos, Theodore?" asked Mother. "I, caught a glimpse of them down on Lake Hakiopolis," said Theodore, not deviating from the truth, but omitting to mention that this had been 3 years previously and the only time flamingos had ever visited Corfu. "I had a handful of pink feathers to commemorate it." "That would be lovely, a few pink flamingo feathers. Wonder where I could source some. I still want to get some black cockatoo feathers which are red and black. That would be pretty too. Ethically sourced, you understand, not ripped off a living bird or a murdered bird just for the sake of the feathers. Ethically sourced. "Jehovah," said Lumi Lover. "Could we catch a glimpse of them, Les dear? Do you suppose we could sneak up on them?" "Sure," said Leslie airily. "Easiest thing in the world. They migrate over the same route every day." The following morning, Leslie came into my room carrying what looked like a strange form of trumpet made out of a cow's horn. I asked him what it was, and he grinned. "It's a flamingo decoy," he said with satisfaction. I was deeply interested and said I had never heard of a flamingo decoy. Neither have I, Leslie admitted. It's an old cow's horn. It's an old cow's horn powder container for muzzle loaders, you know, but the end's broken off, so you can blow on it. By way of illustration, he raised the pointed end of the cow's horn to his lips and blew. The horn produced a long, sonorous sound somewhere between a foghorn and a raspberry, with very vibrant overtones. I listened critically and said that it did not sound a bit like a flamingo. Yes, but I bet Lumi Lover and Harry Honey don't know that, said Leslie. Now all I need is to borrow your flamingo feathers. I was somewhat reluctant to part with such rare specimens from my collection, until Leslie explained why he wanted them and promised that they would come to no harm. At 10 o'clock, Lumi and Harry appeared, having been dressed by Leslie for flamingo hunting. Each wore a large straw hat and gumboots, for, as Leslie explained, you might have to follow the flamingos into the swamps. Lumi and Harry were flushed and excited at the prospect of this adventure, and their enthusiasm when Leslie demonstrated the flamingo decoy knew no bounds. They blew such resounding blasts on it that the dogs went mad and howled and barked, and Larry, furious, leaned out of his bedroom window and said that if we were all going to carry on like a meat of the bloody corn hunt, he was going to move. And you're old enough to know better, was his parting shot as he slammed the window, addressing to Mother, who had just joined us to see what the noise was all about. Addressed to Mother. Right, poor Mother, she's getting the blame for everything again. Why do all mothers get the blame all the time? I don't know. Some mothers are to blame though. Some mothers do have them, and some kids do have them too. I try not to think about that. Right. We eventually got our bolt hunters into the field and walked them about 2 miles, by which time their enthusiasm for flamingo hunting was on the wane. Then we scrambled them up to the top of an almost inaccessible hillock, stationed them inside a bramble bush, and told them to keep calling to attract the flamingos. For half an hour they blew on the horn in turns with great dedication, but their wind started to give out. Towards the end, the noise they were making was beginning to sound more like the despairing cry of a mortally wounded bull elephant than anything in the bird line. Then it was my turn. Panting and excited, I rushed up the hillock and told our hunters that their efforts had not been in vain. The flamingos had indeed responded, but unfortunately they had settled in a valley below a hill half a mile to the east. If they hurried there, they would find Leslie waiting. I was lost in admiration at their American tenacity. Thumping along in their ill-fitting gumboots, they galloped off to the farther hill, pausing periodically as per my instructions to blow gaspingly on the flamingo decoy. When, in an ocean of sweat, they reached the top of the hill, they found Leslie. He said that if they remained there and continued to blow on the decoy, he would make his way round the valley and drive the flamingos up to them. He gave them his gun and game bag so that, as he explained, he could stalk more easily. Then he faded away. It was at this point that our favourite policeman, Filimona Contacosa, entered the act. Filimona was without doubt the fattest and most somnambulistic of all the Corfu policemen. He had been in the force for 30-odd years and owed his lack of promotion to the fact that he had never made an arrest. He had explained to us at great length that he was, in fact, physically incapable of doing so. The mere thought of being harsh to a criminal would fill his pansy dark eyes with tears, and on feast days the slightest sign of altercation among the wine-happy villagers, and you could see him waddling resolutely in the opposite direction. He preferred to lead a gentle life, and every fortnight or so he would pay us a visit to admire Leslie's gun collection, for which we had no permits, and bring gifts of smuggled tobacco to Larry, which was highly illegal then and now, by the way, flowers to Mother and Margot, and sugared almonds to me. The sugared almonds. He had, in his youth, been a deckhand on a cargo boat and had acquired a tenuous command of the English language. And this, combined with the fact that all Corfiotes adore practical jokes, made him perfect for our purposes. He rose to the occasion magnificently. He waddled to the top of the hill, resplendent in his uniform, every kilo of him looking the personification of law and order and a credit to the force. He found our hunters blowing in a desultory fashion on their decoy. Benignly, he asked them what they were doing, responding to kindness like, "Two puppies." Lumi Lover and Harry Honey were only too delighted to compliment Filimona on his truncated English and explain matters to him. To the American's consternation, he suddenly changed from a kindly, twinkling, fat policeman to the cold, brutal personification of officialdom. "You know no flamingos, you no shoot," he snapped at them. "It's forbidden to shoot flamingos." "But darling, we're not shooting them," said Lumi Lover falteringly. "We only want to see them." "Yes, gee, you got it all wrong," said Harry Honey ingratiatingly. "We don't want to shoot the little fellas. We just want to see 'em. No shoot, see." "If you no shoot, why you have gun?" asked Filimona. "Oh, that," said Lumi Lover, reddening. "That belongs to a friend of ours, amigo. Savvy?" Yeah, said Harry Honey. "Friend of ours, Les Durrell. Maybe you know him? He's well known around these parts. I finally got the American accent. Took me a while, didn't it? By the gods, the story's nearly over and I just jammed it in there. Oh well. Philomona stared at them coldly and implacably. I have to laugh at myself. It's quite silly, really. Have to be a bit silly sometimes, don't you? I know this friend, he said at last. Please to open bag. Well, now, steady on. See here, protested Lumi Lover. This isn't our bag, officer. No, said Harry Honey. It belongs to this friend of ours, Daru. You have gun. You have bag, Philomona pointed out. Please to open bag. Well, I must say, I think you're exceeding your duty just a tiny bit. Oh, we need the American accent. I don't think I can do it. Well, I must say, I think you're exceeding your duty just a tiny bit, officer. I really do. I don't know why he sounds like a cross between New York and the South, but I've been watching too much American TV. It gets like that, people are there. Said Lumi Lover while Harry Honey nodded eager assent. But if it'll make you feel any easier, well then, I don't suppose there's much harm in letting you have a little peek. He wrestled briefly with the straps of the bag, opened it and handed it to Philomona. The policeman peered into it, gave a triumphant grunt, and pulled from the interior the plucked and headless body of a chicken, to which were adhering numerous bright pink feathers. Both the stalwart flamenco hunters went white with emotion. But see here now, wait a minute, Lumi Lover began, and his voice trailed away before Philomona's scathing look. Accusing look. The same thing. Scathing. Accusing. Accusing with emphasis. Is forbidden, shoot flamingo, I tell you, said Philomona. I arrest you both. He herded them, alarmed and protesting, down to the village police station, and kept them there for several hours, during which they nearly went mad writing out statements and getting so muddled through nerves and frustration that they kept contradicting each other's stories. To add to their alarm, Leslie and I had assembled a crowd of our village friends who shouted and roared in the terrifying way Greeks have, periodically bellowing, "Flamongo!" and throwing the odd stone at the police station. Eventually, Philemon allowed his captives to send a note to Larry, who stormed down into the village, told Philomona it would be more to the point if he caught some evildoers rather than indulge in practical jokes, and brought our two flamingo hunters back to the bosom of the family. This has got to stop, said Larry angrily. I will not have my guests subjected to ill-bred japes perpetrated by a pair of half-witted brothers. I must say, Lumi Lover and Harry Honey were wonderful. Don't be angry, Larry, darling, said, in a Yankee Doodle accent. Don't be angry. No, that sounds... I'm losing my shit. Don't be angry, Lumi, darling. Larry, darling. Don't be angry, Larry, darling. 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 Forget about it, said Lumi Lover. It's just high spirits. It's just as much our fault as Les. Yes, said Harry, honey. Lumi's right. It's our fault for being so gullible, silly old us. To show that there was no ill feeling, they even went down to the town and brought back a crate of champagne to have a party. And they went down to the village themselves to fetch Philomena up to the house for it. They sat on the terrace, one on each side of the policeman, toasting him coyly in champagne, while Philomena, in a surprisingly good tenor, sang love songs that brightened his great dark eyes with tears. You know, Lumi Lover confided to Larry at the height of the party, he'd be really good looking, really very good looking if he went on a diet. But don't tell Harry I said so, darling, will ya? Right. Thus concludes my butchering of the American dialect and chapter 2 of The Garden of the Gods, which was titled Ghosts and Spiders. And we'll continue tomorrow, no doubt, anytime in the space-time continuum, when the planets align and the mummity razzle-dazzles and gets her shit together. Anytime, anywhere, anyhow, it could be happening. But hasta mañana, till we meet again. Tomorrow's chapter is titled The Garden of the Gods. Behold, the heavens do open, the gods look down, and the unnatural scene they laugh at. Shakespeare, Coriolanus. 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 I got there in the end, but I butchered it too. You may call me the butcher of language, but not really. I just have to work it, babies, like when I'm doing my mosh. Well, work it. Inspire all the spirits and ancestors that love us to come to the party of consciousness and gift us talent and enigma. In my case, more enigma than talent. You understand, but it is what it is. So, I'll be back. Have a beautiful afternoon, evening, morning, nighttime, wherever you are on this blue spiraling marble of a planet. And touch grass, be good and kind to each other, and remember, as always, to never ever let the bastards grind us down. Adieu.